Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.
Hello and good day, guten Tag. Welcome to today's press conference on COVID-19 updates. It is Thursday, 15th of July, and we have a very special guest today. Welcome to His Excellency, Federal Minister of Health, Jens Spahn. We of course also have Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, WHO Director General. We have Dr. Katharina Böhm, Chef de Cabinet, Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director, Maria van Kerkhove, Technical Lead on COVID, Dr. Bernhard Schwartländer, who is Special Advisor to the Director General, and Chief Scientist Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, and we have other guests and colleagues online. Simultaneous translation is available in the official languages and also in German, so journalists attending can also ask in German. With this, I'll hand over to the Director General for the opening remarks and welcoming our guests.
Dankeschön, Christian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Or should I say, Guten Morgen, Guten Tag, and Guten Abend. Thank you for joining us today, and I would like to say, heartily welcome to my friend Jens Spahn, the Federal Minister of Health of Germany. And may I add, vielen Dank, Jens, for your personal support over the past few years, and especially the past difficult 18 months, and for the incredible support of the German government and people for WHO and for global health. I would especially like to express my concern and condolences over the floods that are currently affecting Germany, and I offer my deep condolences to those who have lost someone they love, and my sincere hopes that those who are missing will be found soon. So welcome once again, and I would like to invite you to make your opening comments.
Yes, dear Tedros, ladies and gentlemen, meine Damen und Herren, the first sentences I do in English and I switch to German. Actually, it's good to be here again. It's more or less a year ago that I was here with the French colleague Olivier Véran to show again, actually, the commitment we as the Federal Republic of Germany and the European Union have to the work of the WHO. Und deswegen auch vielen Dank für den herzlichen...
And so thank you for your warm welcome here today. We have agreed that the pandemic is not yet over, although in some countries we are very pleased to see how far they have got in their vaccination campaigns. Although in many parts of the world we are still at the beginning of the vaccination campaigns, many should still be vaccinated, and in these discussions concerning Europe and Germany, I always say it's in our interest to ensure that the entire world is vaccinated, that everyone has access to a vaccine. This pandemic will not be over until it is over for everyone around the world, and this is why we, along with the WHO, support, and we also support the WHO, but together we also support programs to ensure that these vaccines are available in all countries, and we do this under the ACTA program. And today we will also be drawing up an agreement between the WHO and Germany that Germany will be providing 260 million euros in funding specifically for the WHO in order to help to see the development, production and distribution of COVID-19 tests, treatments and above all vaccines. As a country, Germany has decided to commit to this. We are also going to provide at least 30 million vaccines to third countries through COVAX. And today, I think we can say that we should be able to provide considerably more than these 30 million doses. This is our baseline. And in the next coming weeks and months, we should be able to provide more doses to share these with the countries in the world that need them most. Germany is one of the biggest donors for COVAX and ACTA with 2.2 billion euros that we're providing, and then these 260 million to the WHO are a part of that. This also demonstrates that Germany takes its commitments and its job very seriously in fighting international crises. However, it also demonstrates that we see the WHO as taking a leading role in international health politics, and above all, that we give it a leading role in fighting global health crises. Only with a strong WHO we will be able to overcome the COVID pandemic. Only with a strong WHO we will be able to overcome future crises. And for this reason, Germany is a committed and currently the biggest donor in 2020-2021 for WHO. Almost $1 billion were provided in 2020-2021 from the German government for the WHO in their work. And thus we are currently the biggest donor, but for me, I find this, I'm very pleased with this, but I also want to encourage all other member states. The WHO can only be as good as we allow it to be as the member states in providing funding, including their resources, their financial resources, in order to ensure that the WHO is able to cope with all the tasks that it is given during the pandemic and beyond, that if it is able to meet all these expectations, it also needs the financial means. And so I would also like to encourage all other member states to ensure that we have sustainable, not just in this moment of crisis, but that we have ongoing funding for the WHO. Another lesson we can learn from the crisis is that this cooperation can and should be even closer, particularly in times of pandemics. We are also drawing up a pandemic contract, which will be discussed in a working group here today. And what's very important to me here is that we need more commitment, including in the international agreements, the international health regulations. These have been in existence for several years, but previously they have not been binding because there was also no means for following up on this, for seeing how well the member states met these or followed these regulations, and therefore it's very important for cooperation to be very close, both to be able to follow up on these international health regulations, but also if there should be an outbreak and a crisis, that we should be able to act. And so I'm very pleased that there has been a first investigative mission in China, in Wuhan, looking at the possible root cause of the virus, but also I hope that this would have been only the first phase, that there will be ongoing investigation. We are very much interested in discovering where this virus came from, and I would also like to call on our Chinese colleagues that we will be able to continue in this investigation to lead to scientific results. So to sum up, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 has demonstrated to us that a virus can only be fought internationally and together, and this is what the WHO stands for, and so do we as Germany, along with our EU partners and all other countries around the world. We are all committed to the World Health Organization and to making it even stronger in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And vielen Dank, Jens. As I think everyone knows, Germany has been one of the leading lights in the fight against the pandemic globally, under your leadership and that of Chancellor Merkel. Since 2020, Germany contributed close to $750 million to WHO, including more than $500 million to support the COVID-19 response. And as Minister said, Germany is the largest contributor to WHO. Germany was also one of the main drivers behind the formation of the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator last year. And we're very grateful for the further contribution of 260 million euros and 30 million vaccine doses that Mr. Spahan has just announced, will be signing the agreement under the WHO Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan after 2 days press conference. This support comes at a critical time, with cases and deaths increasing globally. So thank you so much again, Mr. Spahan. Vielen Dank. As you know, the WHO Emergency Committee met yesterday and will publish its statement shortly. And I would like to thank Professor Didier Houssin, the chair of the committee, for his leadership and for joining us today. The committee has expressed concern that the pandemic is being mischaracterized as coming to an end when it's nowhere near finished. It has also warned about the strong likelihood for the emergence and global spread of new and possibly more dangerous variants of concern that may be even more challenging to control. The committee also expressed deep concern about the level of funding for WHO Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan for COVID-19, which constrains WHO's ability to coordinate the global response to the pandemic, particularly in terms of having the flexibility we need to move at the speed this virus moves. And the committee has called on all countries to support WHO's call to vaccinate at least 10% of the population of every country by the end of September. These donations announced by Germany today are another step towards reaching those targets. So my heartfelt thanks to Germany and vielen Dank again. But what I find even more encouraging is not just Germany's short-term support, but it is long-term vision. Together, we will end this pandemic, but our horizon must be further, and our ambition must be higher as we work together to prevent, detect, and respond rapidly to future outbreaks with pandemic potential. One of the clear lessons of this pandemic is that the world needs a strong and sustainably resourced WHO at the center of the global health architecture. Germany has been a driving force in advocating for a stronger WHO, but also in making it happen. You have truly walked the talk. And there is a big difference now between your visit last June and this time, almost a year. I also welcome Germany's support for the idea of an international pandemic treaty. Today, a working group of WHO member states is meeting to consider this idea and others to strengthen global health security. If the world continues down the same road, it will continue heading towards the same destination, which is an unsafe world, and another devastating pandemic is inevitable. We need a new approach and a new way of doing things. A treaty would provide a platform for closer international cooperation on preparedness, detection, and response. One key area in which improved cooperation is needed is in the way information about emerging pathogens and outbreaks is collected, analyzed, and disseminated. In May, Minister Spahan joined me to announce the creation of a new WHO hub for pandemic and epidemic intelligence in Berlin, which will open in September of this year. This new initiative will mark a step change in harnessing the power of modern technologies to give all countries the information they need more, better, faster to keep their people safe. So thank you once again, Mr. Spahan. We're in a critical moment, not just in terms of this pandemic, but in terms of the future of global health security. Germany's support and collaboration is incredibly valuable. Thank you and vielen Dank. Before we move to questions, I would like to invite Professor Houssin to make a few remarks about the outcomes of yesterday's emergency committee. Professor Houssin, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Directeur.
Thank you, Director General. Minister, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's true that the situation today, as it has been evaluated by the Emergency Committee, is not good. The recent trends are of concern. 18 months after the public health emergency was declared, we are still running to catch up with the virus, and the virus is still running after us. And if we want to maintain a global approach, when we're dealing with a global phenomenon, it's difficult to overcome all these difficulties. It's true that the evolution of the virus and the differences between the member states are a source of difficulty. I'd like to thank the Secretariat of WHO for the quality of information that we received in the Emergency Committee. And I would also like to thank the members of the Emergency Committee for the recommendations that they were able to make today. The recommendations are twofold. There are recommendations, first of all, to the Secretariat of the World Health Organization. It is clear that the technical expertise and recognized leadership of WHO is of utmost importance when dealing with this type of phenomenon. There is only one World Health Organization, and it is an entity which has a vision of the world and the necessary political strength to make a certain number of decisions. We have to make sure that WHO keeps informing on the evolution of the situation and constantly update on the evolution of the pandemic. And the two recommendations that have been made by the Emergency Committee to WHO are to continue to tirelessly advocate for fair access to vaccines and fair distribution around the world by encouraging local production, sharing of doses, and freeing intellectual property rights, as well as the transfer of technology, increasing production capacities, and of course necessary funding to implement all these measures. It's also essential to be extremely cautious. We should not be tempted to undertake any measures that could increase inequity. I'm referring, for example, to the decision made by some countries to promote a booster dose, a third dose of the vaccine, and when in fact there's no scientific data that justifies that for the moment. If you look at the situation from a global point of view, the second recommendation of WHO is to guide the member states through the complexities of public health measures based on scientific evidence. It is clear that WHO can make a lot of clarifications in a complex situation. There are also recommendations to the member states. Of course, their main responsibility is towards their own population, but when we're dealing with an event like this, and here I'm mainly thinking about the governments of the member states, they also have a global responsibility, and I think that the Minister of Germany has expressed that very clearly a few moments ago. The main recommendation, therefore, that we've made to member states is to acknowledge that access to vaccines and public health measures to maintain social distancing should be taken very seriously. Now, I won't go into the details of the recommendations, but the main recommendations are to continue to use science to implement public health and evidence-based measures in the member states, and to avoid mass gatherings, organized mass gatherings based on a risk analysis. If these events are to be organized, it should be done so with all the necessary security measures. The second recommendation is to support WHO in its call for at least 10% of the population of the member states all around the world to have access to vaccination by September 2021. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor, for your leadership. And now back to you, Christian.
Thank you very much, all. With this, we open the floor to questions, and of course, I would like to invite questions to our special guest here today. First, and I see first here on Andreas Rinke from Reuters, please. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Andreas Rinke from Reuters. I have one question to the General Director, please. Mr. Spahn just mentioned that he wants a further investigation of the origins of COVID. Do you see enough willingness of the part of Chinese government to do so? Und Herr Spahn, an Sie eine Frage.
And a question for you, Minister Spahn. You mentioned that Germany will probably be able to provide more than these 30 million vaccine doses to other states. Will you already be able to tell us how this will be done, whether it will be through COVAX or through bilateral agreements, and also for which countries? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. On the, I think the question to me is the origins. As you know, we have done the phase 1, and the phase 1 have shown some progress, but there are also some challenges that has to be addressed. And one of the challenges is what you mentioned, access to raw data, especially the data, the start of the pandemic, the raw data was not shared. And now we have designed the second phase of the study, and we are asking actually China to be transparent, open, and cooperate, especially on the information raw data that we asked for at the early days of the pandemic. And we will be discussing with member states on the phase 2, and hope member states will help in guiding to address the challenges that I have already underlined among other things. Thank you, and to you, Minister.
Actually, in general, there are 3 lines we are working on. First one is short-term, to actually give doses that are not needed for our national campaign to COVAX. That's actually the way we prefer for most of the donations we do through COVAX, and some bilateral donations in addition, which might be around 20% of the whole quantity. These are mostly focused to the Western Balkans, to the Eastern Partnership like Ukraine, Namibia, and other countries actually we are in talks with, but 80% at least will go through COVAX. That's the commitment we made, and that will remain. If and how many doses we can add to the 30 millions, we will see in the upcoming weeks. We are lucky enough that our vaccination campaign is making good progress, so we will be able to give doses to other countries in need. Actually, our approach from the very beginning was we will bet on different horses, as I always said it, because no one of us knew actually which vaccine will really make it to approval. So we have contracts through the European Union with many of the different sellers, producers of vaccines. So actually there will be a surplus, and that one we want to share with the world. First step is 30 million. How many more I can't tell you yet, but I'm very sure it will be more. Second line is the financial contribution we give to COVAX, the additional or the 2.2 billion and 260 million as we will sign today to WHO of it. And the third one is the cooperation. That's more medium and long-term commitment. It's the cooperation with states, especially in Africa, that want to build up production capacities on their own. 99% of the vaccines used in Africa for all different diseases are not produced in Africa. And so we want to support, in good cooperation with companies like BioNTech or CureVac from Germany, we want to support other countries to build up production capacities, but obviously that is something for the mid and long term.
Thank you both very much. Next question goes to Corinne Gretler from Bloomberg. Corinne, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I also have a question about the origin study, one for Mr. Tedros and one for Mr. Spahn. Is the lack of the raw data the biggest issue that's kind of hampering moving forward with the origin study? What are the other challenges? yeah, and basically, you say you're discussing this with member states and asking China to be transparent. Sometimes, I guess, it feels a little bit like the momentum has lost steam and maybe fizzling out. I just kind of want to see, what your take is on that, Mr. Spahn.
Okay. No, thank you very much. Starting from the last one you said, momentum, if momentum has been lost, I don't think so, because we need to really continue we need to continue to start the study in order to know what exactly happened. If we know what happened, then we can prevent future similar crises or problems. So it's basics. This is what we do when any outbreak happens. Forget about a pandemic of this proportion, unprecedented. Even in any outbreak, you go and understand the origins, and we need to know what happened in order to prevent the next one. But there is the other part of it, especially considering the unprecedented nature of this pandemic, the number of people that died and the number of people that suffered. Take the number of deaths alone, more than 4 million. I think we owe it to them to know what happened. And everybody should cooperate to know what happened and to prevent the same crisis from happening again. And that's why we need cooperation. And then to the challenges, of course, one is, with regard one challenge, one problem is sharing raw data. And I said it at the conclusion of the first phase that there is this problem and it has to be addressed. And the second is, there was a premature push to, especially reduce one of the options, like the lab theory. As you know, I was a lab technician myself. I'm an immunologist, and I have worked in the lab. And lab accidents happen. It's common. I have seen it happening. And I myself had errors. So it can happen. And checking what happened, especially in our labs, is important. And we need information, direct information on what the situation of these labs was before and at the start of the pandemic. Then if we get full information, we can exclude that. So one of the challenges, again, is, a challenge of access and also transparency with regard to the hypotheses that are put. So I hope, because of these two things, there will be better cooperation. The two things I said, one, knowing, understanding what happened can help us to prevent the problem from happening in the future. But second, I think we owe it to the millions who suffered and to the millions who died really to understand what happened. And I hope there will be better cooperation. And we have continued the engagement with China and also with member states. And there will be better cooperation to get into the bottom of what happened. Minister?
Well, first of all, I absolutely agree with what was just said. 2 days ago, in a discussion in Frankfurt, the city of Frankfurt, a 7-year-old girl actually asked me, where did it come from? And I could not give her a final answer. And I think we just need to know where it came from. Of course, we all have theories, and the one of that there is zoonotic base to it all makes sense, but nevertheless, we really need to know how it happened, just to learn from it and to prevent it, or to be better able to prevent it for the future. And so we do appreciate the cooperation of the Chinese government so far for the first mission, but that's not yet enough, obviously. Like the G7 leaders called on more investigations, we fully support this, and so we can just call on China to intensify the cooperation to examine the origin of this virus, to learn for the future, but as Tedros just said, we owe it to the people.
Thank you very much, both. The next question goes to Nina Lammers from RTL NTV. Nina, please unmute yourself.
Vielen Dank. Eine Frage an... Thank you. One question for Minister Jens Spahn. Besides the donations of funding and vaccines, there is a third way we could support poor countries, which is with the patent rights for the vaccines, if these are waived for the moment. The WHO has already supported this a few times. Germany seems reluctant at the moment. Now we've heard from Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, who travelled to the US a couple of days ago. He said that he is open to this. So can we expect that the German government will be changing its position concerning the temporary waiving of the patent? And if yes, why, and if not, why not?
How much would you appreciate if Germany changed its mind concerning the property rights on COVID-19 vaccines? And also another question to both of you. Some people say that the imbalance between the rich and the poor countries is now increasing as the rich countries are now giving third vaccines, like for example Israel and also Germany might do it soon. So do you think the imbalance will grow between the rich and the poor countries? Do you agree to that opinion? Thank you.
Also was die deutsche Position...
As for the German position concerning patents for vaccines, our position has not changed fundamentally. I think we need to approach this from the other side. What is our goal? The goal is to vaccinate the world as fast as possible, to give everyone around the world access to vaccines. The next question then is, what is the best way to achieve this goal? And it is very clear that having a patent or providing it does not resolve the fundamental issue. Producing vaccines is too complex. There's energy exchange, you need exchange with experts, you need training. Even pharma corporations that were involved in the production of these vaccines took months to be able to have the production capacities at the end. So we think that this debate does not actually address the real problem. So it's very ideological, and we can have this debate, but the really important question is, what is the fastest way to produce as much vaccine as possible for the world, in particularly also mRNA vaccines, not only but also, and the corporations are working together. BioNTech, Pfizer have already begun cooperating with other organizations around the world. I spoke to President Macron of France in South Africa. We were part of talks there, and France and Germany, along with the EU, we all want to support the African Union, countries in Africa, in increasing their capacity for production of vaccines, not only for COVID-19 but beyond that as well. And this is the key difference to us, that we can build up production capacity. In my opinion, it also seems that this is working. We will be as able to, over the next few months, to provide hundreds of millions of people with vaccines in the next few months, and we will be doing everything we can to ensure that this continues to move quickly. As for the booster vaccine, the third vaccination in different countries, I just mentioned South Africa. When I was there 4 or 5 weeks ago, in Germany we were discussing whether 13 or 15-year-olds should be vaccinated, because we were discussing whether the mRNA vaccine should be allowed. So this shows how privileged we are in Europe, where we were in a country where not 1% of the population has been vaccinated yet, and at the same time in Germany we're discussing whether to vaccinate 12 or 15-year-olds. So this does show how privileged our position is. So we should discuss this critically and openly, as Professor Hassan just said. But from my point of view, we need both for acceptance as well. It needs to be from our own interest. It's for humanitarian reasons, but it's in our own interest to vaccinate the world. But it must also be accepted. And this is why the vaccination campaign must also be successful in every country, while we are also providing vaccinations to the entire world. I want both to be possible, for us to be able to provide a third vaccination while also providing a first vaccination to everyone around the world.
Thank you very much. And I'm looking around, maybe Mike Ryan wants to add.
Me then. Okay. No, thank you. On vaccines, will the divide increase or improve? Will it deteriorate further or improve the imbalance? My answer is it's in our hands. If we commit to sharing, and the targets we have already set, the 10% by September, 40% by December, and the 70%, we believe that especially those countries who have access to vaccines and who have the manufacturing capacity or who have the economic capacity, I think can support in making it happen. So the imbalance can be reversed. We have the tools, and we know how to address this problem, so we can address it's in our hands. But for this to happen, there should be a real commitment, especially from G20 countries or G20 plus, because most of the capacity is in those countries. Then going to the IP, on the IP, as you know, especially at the start, what we were advocating for was increasing the production and fair distribution. And we have said it many times actually. AstraZeneca followed that line, especially commitment to voluntary licensing, and started making agreements with India, with Korea. India and Korea are producing AstraZeneca, and now Australia, Japan, Thailand are also producing soon, and we expect more countries. If the other companies have done the same thing, we could have better volume to share. So at the end of the day, the issue is how do we have an enough pie to share? So if it was addressed using voluntary licensing, or the hub we used, the patent hub, if they contributed their technology to that hub and then production increased and we have better pie to share, there was no need even to raise the IP if there was enough to share. The problem now is, after pushing in that direction, there was no response except from one company, basically. And because of that, there is a problem now. There is a market failure. There is a market failure. So when there is a market failure, there should be someone who should intervene to address it. So those who will intervene to address it will be those who have the capacity in manufacturing capacity, or those who have the multinational companies. And one way to do it is the IP waiver, and that's why we're pushing for IP waiver. But when we say IP waiver, it's not to really snatch the property of the private sector. As WHO, we really appreciate the private sector for what they have done. It's a historic record to have a vaccine in less than a year, and they have to be appreciated. And at the same time, not only appreciation, when we ask for IP waiver, the proposal from WHO is the high-income countries can take or can give some incentives to those companies as part of their stimulus package. So that could really help them, to address any financial losses that they may have. So the incentive could be one. On the other hand, the companies have social responsibility as well, because this pandemic is unprecedented, and it has happened almost after 100 years. And the IP waiver is, the provisions for IP waiver was to use it during this unprecedented situation or emergency situation. So having, some social responsibility from the companies will be important. And from the parties who are now negotiating in WTO, I think there could be a balance, especially if there is an agreement in IP waiver, it could be for a limited period. For instance, instead of opening it without any limited period, it could be for a year or two, and it could be for a specific product like the vaccine. So there could be a balance that can help address some of the challenges, but at the same time moving forward. So at the end of the day, though, the key is making sure that we have enough vaccines to achieve those targets. If I take the highest target which we want to achieve by mid next year is the 70%. And vaccination of 70% of the population would really help us to control this virus and open our society. The whole world is sick and tired, and I think we need to really have a commitment to that 70%, so we have enough vaccination to open up the world and we have our lives and livelihoods back. Thank you, Christian. Mike? Okay.
Thank you, Wolf. Next question goes to Priti Patnaik from Geneva Health Files. Priti, please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my question. This is for the Minister. It follows up on the previous question. The leadership of Germany in global health and specifically at WHO is acknowledged. But how do you reconcile the position of Germany, in opposition to the TRIPS waiver? One could argue that there's some kind of a discordance between health and trade interests within Germany. That doesn't seem like a position of leadership as far as the TRIPS waiver is concerned. How would you explain that? Thank you.
I'm still practicing with this micro, but now it's working. Thank you very much. Actually, again, what we say is, let's talk about what we want to achieve. And what we want to achieve is that all citizens on the world have access to vaccines, affordable access to vaccines. And then the question is, how is that reached? And we don't think that only changing TRIP waiver or the framework here, or to open it up, or even to enforce something there would really make that difference. Because you need tech transfer. That's one of the most complex things on the world you can try to produce is a vaccine, especially now with this new technology of mRNA. And so you definitely need cooperation. Just having a patent, a waiver, does not solve the problem. And what we do see is that the companies are willing to cooperate. I'm almost in a weekly discussion with the companies that we have contracts with, and we push them to cooperate, and they do with other countries on the world, with other companies on the world to produce even more. And I wouldn't wonder if in the next year we will have more or less an overcapacity of mRNA production, which is good actually, then we have enough, but there are so many corporations on the way that actually what we want to reach, what we want to achieve can be achieved without inflicting with these waiver regulation that is there. And I mean, Tedros just made it clear. These were companies, these were people with their research, with their engagement for years, by the way. It was not invented within some months. This was a 10, 15 years journey to develop this mRNA technology that is now for the first time used for this vaccine. That should be appreciated. And of course you appreciate it by intellectual property. And so if we would not be able to reach the goal without this debate of how to change the TRIPS approach and patent waivers, then we would be on the way with you or with many others, but we can reach it without. So why put this burden of this ideological debate on this? Instead, we should just solve the problem and bring vaccines to the people.
Thank you very much, Minister. Next question goes to Hagen Strauss from Rheinische Post. Hagen, please unmute yourself.
Ja, vielen Dank, dass ich...
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask this question. For the Director General, Minister Spahn called on other countries to provide more funding. Would you also support this call, and which countries in particular would you call on?
Thank you very much. So more funding, I fully agree, and thank you so much to Germany and Minister Spahn for walking the talk. Not only they're asking other countries to contribute, but also they have increased their contribution in the last 2 years very, very significantly. And then the other part is not only increasing funding, but at the same time flexible funding. And the bulk of funding we get from Germany is flexible, and we really appreciate that. So when we ask for funding, it has to be more, but at the same time flexible. Then on which countries? We're asking actually all countries to contribute. As you know, we have a working group now composed of member states. It's chaired by a German colleague, Björn Kummel, and it has been there for some months now. And one of the recommendations actually they're putting together is increase in assessed contribution. And if it's assessed contribution, then many countries, almost all member states will be involved. And that will be a very important development or progress. But in addition to that, we will continue to need voluntary contributions like what Germany, we're signing now with Germany today. And this will be specifically with countries G20 plus some countries who have better economic capacity to provide. So I think if I tailor the request to specific, it will be a G7, G20, and some countries out of G20, but who have good capability to finance. So I can say G20 plus would be, I think, the target. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General. Next question goes to Laurent Sierra from Swiss News Agency. Laurent, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. Question to Minister Spahn. Federal Chancellor Merkel said that Germany won't go for mandatory vaccination of health workers and critical people as France decided to do. And it seems now that every European country is facing the period where they have to convince the most skeptical part within the population. So what kind of new concrete steps are you going to take in the next few months in order to convince these people to reach that part of the population? Thank you.
Das stimmt, das ist eine Situation.
This is true. We are in a situation where vaccination campaigns in many countries, and probably in all countries over time, will reach this point where initially those receive vaccines who actively want to be vaccinated, who are easy to reach. We are now coming into this phase, along with other countries, where we are trying to reach those who are not actively seeking a vaccination but who can be reached with information and with an offer. And so we want to work with in federal Germany in the different Bundesländer, but we want to work in towns and villages with different societies. The German Bundesliga is also going to take part in this, so to have meetings outside churches, outside mosques, and to call on people to get vaccinated. So that's our motto in this phase of the campaign. And one very important point is that vaccines are the way back to normality, to freedom, but it's also a protection for the healthcare system. And we had a discussion about the fact that getting vaccinated is a very personal decision, but though this is true, it is also a decision that affects other people. In getting vaccinated, you don't protect only yourself, but also others. And anyone who chooses not to get vaccinated and runs the risk of falling ill, potentially very seriously, in the end that will then affect the doctors and nurses who have to take care of them. And so the question of whether to get vaccinated is indeed a personal decision, but it's also one that will always affect other people, and that is something that we are trying to make very clear in our campaign now.
Herzlichen Dank. Thank you very much, Minister Spahn. With this, we reached the end of our press briefing. I thank all very much, and before I give the floor to Dr. Tedros for closing, I'll invite Dr. Mike Ryan for some closing remarks on Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, Christian, and greetings, Minister Spahn, welcome. I remember the first time we met was frontline of an Ebola response together. And it shows again the commitment of Germany to seeing what happens and goes on the ground and the realities of epidemic containment in the front line. Again, just to note that Germany is the largest contributor to the contingency fund for emergencies that WHO maintains, which represents the fastest, globally the fastest response mechanism financially to emergencies. And we continue to use that fund day in, day out. This increased the speed, efficiency, effectiveness and life-saving quality of our interventions. Secondly, just again, the collaboration we're currently working on for the WHO Pandemic Intelligence Hub in Berlin is superb, and we have a huge opportunity together to build with other partners from all around the world the sort of platform that will take us forward from to another level, a completely different level on our ability to collect, analyse and develop insights from ever more complex data from multiple sources. And I think it leverages off the Berlin and its environment, which has really established itself globally as a leader in this field, and we hope that this collaboration will lead to better tools, better data, better decisions and better outcomes for people during epidemics and future. And just one final word on the origins studies. I wanted to come in at the time. Because there was a question about continuity in phase 1 and phase 2, and I think it's important to recognise that the phase 1 studies were carried out by a hugely dedicated, tremendously courageous, massively patient group of international scientists who came together at the invitation of the Director General and worked tirelessly under incredible pressure, incredible duress, and produced a high quality report that represents the basis on which we can now move forward into phase 2. It's important to recognize, too, that they have built important relationships and trust with equally competent Chinese scientists and counterparts on the other side. Those scientists and the further scientists that we will involve as we try to build a more formal and standardized and collective approach to origin studies. I think one thing we've all learnt in this process, the issue of the origins of viruses, as we've all seen, are not purely scientific. There are other issues that come to bear. And we need to recognize those in future, and we need to create a safe and permanent space in which the science and the understanding, as the DG said, we need to understand the origins because we need to know how to prevent the next one. But we also have to recognize that we live in a real world, and we have to try and create the platforms in which science can be successful, also recognizing the realities of the world around that science. The DG has done it before. I myself, Maria, many others here would like to do it again to thank the team of scientists on our side and our own WHO staff who participated and supported not only the phase 1 studies but all of the work that went in before, all of the work that has gone in since in order to design the next phase of studies. We look forward to working with our Chinese counterparts on that process, and the Director General will outline measures to Member States, I believe, Katharina, tomorrow, on Friday. Tomorrow is Friday, I lose track of the days around here. In order to create a more stable and predictable process moving forward as we seek the answers that the Director General has laid out. But again, to say, we very much, this organisation depends so much on the quality of the scientists in all of your organisations, and they have done their job superbly, as I said, under a very challenging conditions. And the DG has outlined those challenges and is very clear in what needs to improve. But that issue does not lie at the foot of the scientists who did this work.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryan. Before I give further closing remarks to Dr. Tedros, we'll be sending the audio files and the remarks of our special guests and Dr. Tedros right after the press conference. The full transcript will be posted again tomorrow morning on our website. Dr. Tedros.
Thank you. So I don't need to have another summary to do, so I concur with Mike. And then I would like also to thank Jens, my friend, for joining us, and also appreciation to all the support from you and Germany, and vielen Dank. Then to Professor Oussin for your leadership, sir, thank you so much for leading the emergency committee, and I hope the recommendations will help address some of the challenges we're facing now. And I would like to thank the media. We have, I think, colleagues from Germany this time. Thank you for joining. Vielen Dank. And see you in our upcoming press conference. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jens.
Thank you for listening today, and thank you for supporting us with our sponsors. Please go to depictions.media for more information, and click on our contact link and let us know how we can help bring your story and help bring us to a better world. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.